Welcome to the session Financing to Close the Circularity Gap here at COP28. A warm welcome to the live audience, but also to the viewers at home. I think we're going to have a really interesting session here, and thanks for making it. Also, a big thanks to the organizer, the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management, PAGE, Partners, Action for the Green Economy, a number of UN bodies, and Circular Economy Foundation, an impact organization out of the Netherlands, with the goal to help transition us to a circular economy with practical and scalable solutions. And thanks for the EIB and the Benelux for hosting us in this beautiful pavilion here in Dubai. My name is Martijn Lopez-Cardozo. I'm the CEO of Circular Economy. I'm delighted to be the moderator of your session today. So today's day 5 of COP28. And we'll be discussing quite an important topic: financing the transition to a circular economy. So why does this topic matter? And why is it relevant now? Before I introduce the great lineup of speakers, let me quickly spend a couple of minutes to set the context. So in the last couple of days, a lot already has been said on, how can we keep the 1.5 degrees alive? And yes, there is some positive news. Looks like fossil fuels have peaked and there's a massive build-out of infrastructure on the renewables. However, just looking at the renewables, that's also associated with a massive build-up of infrastructure and a lot of material use. We also know energy use is going to increase quite a bit in the next 10 to 20 years. So, how can we do that? And by doing that, we also have to look at the material side. In fact, if you look at the transition and keeping the 1.5 degrees alive, almost half of the climate change achievements have to come from the material side, from the circular economy. So to drive the transition to a global circular economy at the speed and scale necessary, we need transnational cooperation and significant targeted investment into the circular economy. That's why we're here today. At the last COP, COP27, Minister Heijnen from the Netherlands presented the high-level roadmap in which a number of multilateral development banks defined key priorities to help secure the financing for this transition. Circular Economy Foundation has been honored to help facilitate this. In the last year, a number of multilateral development banks have worked diligently on trying to implement the roadmap and further improving measurement. This has been done as part of the Circular Exchange Network. Now, with the official secretariat hosted by the European Investment Bank. And we're very glad to have one of our senior representatives of the EIB here today. In this session today, we'll focus on the role of the national governments in helping finance the transition to a circular economy. Furthermore, the national governments are vital in also working on the regulatory barriers and also creating the enabling environment. There's a very direct interplay with financing and what the national governments can do. I'm also very pleased that my colleague Esther Goodwin-Brown will provide a sneak preview of the Circularity Gap report, which is going to be launched early next year, with a focus on not only the climate agenda, but also a just and fair transition. So, without further ado, I would love to introduce Without further ado, it's now a great honor to introduce our first speaker, Viviane Heijnen, Minister for the Environment of the Netherlands, who would give the opening keynote. And as Minister, she's responsible for sustainability, active mobility, and of course, the transition to a circular economy. Earlier this year, she sent a new national program for circular economy to the Dutch Parliament for the next 7 years. She's also been very active on the international stage. She was the initiator of the Circular Exchange Network, which has been very successfully launched at the COP27. Let me welcome to the stage Minister Heijnen.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to the joint pavilion of the European Investment Bank and the Benelux countries. And for those of you who have only just arrived to the conference, welcome at COP28. Today is Finance Day, and that's a day initiated by the United Nations to acknowledge the role that banks can play in supporting sustainable development. It's a perfect day to hold this event on financing to close the circularity gap. We need the financial sector to be with us now more than ever. National governments have a key role in creating the right conditions for this, and that's what this event is about. So what's the circular economy got to do with climate change? The short answer is everything. We've all come to Dubai on a shared mission to limit global warming, and we all agree that the role of finance and financial institutions is critical in achieving this goal. But there's another fundamental aspect that isn't as well known yet, but that is getting more and more recognition. And that's the role of materials and natural resources in climate change. Production, extraction, and processing of raw materials account for more than 90% of measured impact on biodiversity and water stress, 55% of greenhouse gas emissions, and more than 40% of pollution. A circular economy can help solve all these problems. An economy in which waste is a valuable resource, in which products are designed so that they can be used again and again. An economy that safeguards prosperity for future generations. And finance plays a critical role in achieving this circular economy. More and more people are becoming aware of this. The penny has dropped, so to speak. Last year, I introduced a high-level roadmap on finance for circularity. It sets out how international financial institutions can work together in order to improve funding for the circular economy. Since then, a dedicated network of multilateral development banks has joined forces on this issue. That's important because averting ecological harm and updating risk perceptions are complex. You can't do that alone. It's crucial that these banks continue to work together and leverage their collective expertise. I'm happy to see the financial sector building on this collaboration, but we need more. Growing cooperation between banks is one side of the coin. The other side is national governments that ensure finance actually flows to circular projects and programs. We need them to free up funds that are now waiting to be used. We need them to change the rules for a circular economy and to ensure an international level playing field that supports the circular economy rather than the linear economy. I'm talking about tax policies, accounting standards, and other incentives. We as governments must move beyond thinking in isolation. We have to deliver the circular economy to the wider world, because the circular economy is about people, jobs, and economic development. That's why we're here. Naturally, this raises questions. What exactly is the role of national governments, and how can we further scale up the circular economy? To explore such practical questions, the NDC Circular Economy Toolbox was launched during MENA's Climate Week recently. I applaud the 3 UN organizations, UNEP, UNDP, and UNFCCC, that worked so hard to develop it. The toolbox can help governments formulate effective policies to promote the circular economy as part of their national climate plans. Right now, a circular economy is specifically mentioned as a mitigation measure in only 27% of NDCs, so there's a lot of scope for improvement there. Let's all use this toolbox to integrate circularity into our climate plans. And let's embrace our task as national governments to facilitate finance for circularity. That's the key message of this event. There's no time to lose. Ensuring a livable planet for future generations, let's make that our first priority in everything that we do. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Minister Heijnen. Indeed, not only pollution, but also think about those numbers. 90% of biodiversity loss and 55% of climate change can be mitigated with circular economy solutions. So very important we're having this session here today. It's now a great honor to introduce Esther Goodwill-Brown, a colleague from mine at Circular Economy Foundation and head of systemic initiatives. And she will provide a sneak preview in the Circularity Gap report that I'm sure you all know, but not the last edition, although she will also spend a bit of time on that, but also a sneak preview into next year's one. Welcome to the stage, Esther.
Thank you very much, Martijn, and good morning to you all. As Martijn said, I'll give a sneak preview into our next Circularity Gap report that launches in January, but also talk a little bit more about this gap that we're wanting to finance. So, over the past decades, humanity has reached two major milestones. The world is consuming 100 billion tons of materials annually, and it is 1 degree warmer. This means the globe is overrun by unsustainable practices, processes and behaviors that are accelerating global warming, pollution and biodiversity loss, as we've just heard. It's within this context that we have crossed 6 out of 9 planetary boundaries. And this ecological overshoot is primarily driven by exponential growth in raw material consumption, which has tripled globally since 1970. Meanwhile, the responsibility for breaching these boundaries is not being equally shared. The material and carbon footprints of high-income nations account for the bulk of this overshoot, which is deeply intertwined with global inequalities, with the shocking statistics like those released only 2 weeks ago by Oxfam, showing how deeply intertwined and truly unequal our global economy is. The consumption and investment of the wealthiest 1% of the global population is responsible for the same amount of emissions as the poorest 66%. It is clear that we must do better. Our economic model is destabilizing societies and the planet. And so it's time for a major upgrade, one that prioritizes human well-being as well as the planet. And we think this should be a circular economy. And as we've heard, circular economy solutions are vital to the climate, because material use forms the basis of our economies and is a strong proxy for environmental impact. 70% of greenhouse gas emissions can be traced back to extraction and processing of materials. And the circular economy, as Minister Heijnen said, is not only critical for achieving environmental goals. There is also a huge and largely untapped potential and opportunity to change the way we live and work, spurring innovation, enterprise, and under the right conditions, decent jobs for all. It is against this backdrop that we established the Circularity Gap Reporting Initiative, where we analyse how materials can be transformed into the societal benefits that we see are so lacking in many parts of the world. And we do this by reporting on the state of circularity globally, nationally, and for the first time this year, also on a city level. We inspire engagement and collaboration to transform theory on the page into real-life action. And we enable stakeholders to prioritise circular strategies that work for their contexts, looking across global systems that can accelerate the circular economy. And we do this crucially by acknowledging that different countries have different priorities, different contexts, and different starting points. Whilst many high-income countries score high on the Human Development Index, they have high levels of consumption that must be reduced. Whilst many lower-income countries need to increase their Human Development Index, they will need to do so using resources and materials. There is no one-size-fits-all. To date, we have produced 6 global circularity gap reports. And the launch, as Martijn said, of the next global circularity gap report will take place in January of next year. However, across these reports, we've seen a trend that is altogether not so promising. In 2018, when we first produced the global circularity gap statistic, the world was 1.9% circular, meaning that roughly 10% of the materials we use globally were being cycled back into the economy every year. In 2020, the world was 8.6% circular. And then earlier this year, our 2023 edition, we put out the number 7.2, showing that we are very much moving in the wrong direction. Now, these figures can be disheartening for good reason, but what we've also tried to do is to, over the last 6 years, is to dig into different impact layers that can give us some clues about how we can build up circular economy solutions to close this gap, to reverse the direction, and achieve different impact goals. In 2019, we analysed how materials are used to fulfill key societal needs, from housing to nutrition and mobility. In 2021, we explored the link between circular economy solutions and climate change, a new impact layer where we modelled 21 solutions and calculated their impact on global GHG emissions, finding a potential 40% reduction in emissions. And then earlier this year, we added the planetary boundaries. We focused on 4 key systems to evaluate the potential of the circular economy to reverse ecological overshoot and bring back the global economy within a safe operating space. So when we release our Global Circularity Gap report in January, we will have a new focus, and that is going to be on action, on how to put into action the 16 solutions we laid out in our 2023 report, looking at different country contexts and the circular solutions that suit them best for closing the circularity gap. We'll also be diving into 3 essential enabling pillars that we need to scale circular economy solutions and close this gap. Firstly, policy. So how do we create a level playing field that aligns profits with people and the planet? Finance, the topic we're here to discuss today. So how can we get these economics right with finance that allocates capital and circular economy solutions to drive innovation and increase uptake of new circular business models? And crucially, people. Ensuring we have the right people, skills, and expertise in place to scale these solutions, but also because people are both impacted by the impacts of our current linear economy and increasingly by the impacts of climate change. And at the same time, they are essential levers for achieving this transition, for achieving any of the ambitious targets that governments and businesses are setting around the world. We've zoomed in on the role of finance this year because of the vital role it plays in a circular economy. And because our current linear economy, circular solutions are currently not considered a first best by many economic actors. And this is largely due to how we perceive value and how our economies perceive value. By adopting policies to properly price material extraction, governments can incentivize consumption and investment decisions towards circular solutions and more sustainable options. Of course, shifting incentives is just one of the many things policymakers can do and have in their toolbox to make this shift. So closing off this presentation and handing back to you, Martijn, and the panel, I'd like to pose a very simple question. How can policymakers help direct finance to the circular economy? thank you very much, and I invite you to scan this QR code to learn more about the initiative and also to download our new report when it's released in January. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Esther. That was great, and I think it provides a great backdrop for the next portion of this session. So first, I will have a short fireside chat with Mr. Fayol from the European Investment Bank that I'll introduce shortly, followed by a panel with a number of panelists. So I'll now get seated next to Mr. Fayol for the fireside chat. So before I ask you the first question, let me properly introduce you. Mr. Fayol is the VP of European Investment Bank. He oversees financing of the environment, climate action, circular economy. And he's also been very instrumental in working actually with the Dutch government and now hosting and facilitating and leading the secretariat at the European Investment Bank for the Circular Exchange Network. So first question, Mr. Fayol, if you sort of walk around at COP, and of course European Bank has a great focus on climate and circularity, what do you see the role of your institution, but also maybe more broadly the multilateral development banks in the transition to a circular economy?
Thanks a lot, and many thanks for the invitation. Good morning to all of you, and congratulations to the Netherlands for the role you play in pushing the idea of circular economy. This is not the easiest one, and it is certainly not the least important one. We at EIB, we have put over the last years climate as a top priority of our action. And we want, EIB is the EU bank, so this is the Bank of the European Union. This is a big bank that finances year after year around 70 billion euros of projects. And we want to transform the EU bank into the EU climate bank by prioritizing projects that are renewable energy, energy efficiency, innovation, and also circular economy. And I have to say that last year, we've done close to 60% of our action in climate action and environment, which is actually a major change for the institution. Now, what do we do in circular economy projects? Over the last 5 years, we have done 3.4 billion euros of circular economy projects in 118 projects. That means, and I'll give you just 2 examples of this kind of projects. That means average size of projects is 30 million. This is the biggest among the multilateral development banks, but it is only 1.5% of our lending volume. So big but small. And what we see is that there is a lack of projects. I have to say that. We don't have enough projects that we could finance and that we would like to finance in circular economy. Even if in the recent period, I have seen an increase in 2 areas. One is industry, and the second one is cities. And I think this is probably the future of much more projects for circular economy, industry, and cities. One of the problems that we are facing, actually, was very well explained by Esther in the report. There is a big problem with a big problem. There is something that you need to take into account when you do circular economy projects. This is the impact on labor market. How do you reskill workers? How do you change the way we work so that this is seen as an opportunity and not just a reason for concerns for the job market? Now, just let me tell you 2 examples. One is in Belgium and the Netherlands, a 40 million project that we financed last year called Renewy. it has several aspects, but one that I find very interesting, which is with high-tech sorting lines that allows to have more material to be recycled when you do recycling, which is quite interesting. And second one in Italy, Saviola, which is a project for post-consumption wood processing, and where also we have seen a big impact on this economy in Italy. We have developed C3, which is the Circular City Center, which is basically sharing views, sharing pipelines with municipalities. The first project that we have developed this year is with the city of Leuven in Belgium. Also a very interesting project. So you see there are many interesting projects, but altogether the volumes are rather small compared with what we should do.
Well, thanks. I think this gives quite a good perspective. So 1.5% of a big number is still a big number, but if 1.5% would become 15%, that would be a 10x, and I think that's definitely what's needed. So maybe we can segue a bit on, I know in your bank, but also at the World Bank and in multilateral banks like African Development Bank, Asian Development Bank, all the other multilateral development banks, you know, there has been a focus on climate and in some cases also on circularity. And when we, you know, a year and a half ago tried to convene that group, you know, there was quite a challenge to get everybody in the same room and start talking using the same vocabulary and also trying to share some of the practices and some of the challenges like measurement. So now under the guidance of EIB, that group has been convening and been working quite productively. What has your experience been so far? What are the big, you know, challenges perhaps, but also, you know, some of the big opportunities?
Look, I would say let's go step by step. All MDBs, all the multilateral development banks do not have the same priority put to circular economy as EIB or the World Bank, actually, to give you just two examples. Now, you see that things move. In Helsinki, where there was this World Summit in the spring, we had a very, very interesting discussion with the representatives from all the MDBs. The World Bank, EBRD, Inter-American Development Bank, the Asian Development Bank and us decided to create a working group to work together on circular economy issues. Now, what we see is that it is transforming into something that is more an MDB circularity exchange network, which shows that there is an interest. And actually the interest is twofold. One, it is to exchange among MDBs. Exchange about the things we see, the projects we do, the problems we face in implementing these projects. And this is how we are going to make progress. And the second thing is to work on indicators that would be common indicators if we want to speak the same language on circular economy among MDBs, across MDBs. And here we are not there, but there is a time frame, and I hope that next work will be able to bring positive results on these common indicators of MDBs. There is also an initiative that we have been taken not with MDBs but with national promotional banks in Europe. This is called the Joint Initiative on Circular Economy that has been launched by the European Commission with the support of many of our peers in European countries. And actually, what I find interesting is that here you have volume, close to 10 billion euros. So it is interesting to show that when you have a will, you have a way, basically. And the Europeans, I think, show the way.
Well, thank you, Mr. Friot. I know you have to run to another session, so I have one sort of final closing question. Of course, this session is a bit more focused on the role of the national governments. And of course, as we already saw in the presentation and from the presentation of Minister Heijnen, there's a strong interrelation between like a bank, like a European Investment Bank, and the environment that's created in which you invest. So what would your perspective be on the role of governments, and how can they get that 1.5% to a much bigger number?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very important question, and I will try to be to be humble, speaking in next to a minister. But I would say three things that governments should do. One is raising awareness. And here I have a precise example in mind, which is just last week in my country, France. The government has made advertisement on TV where you see a guy who is welcoming somebody in a store, selling a refrigerator or selling shirts, and the person comes, it's a man or a lady, and says, I want a new fridge, or I want a new shirt. And the guy says, okay, certainly, madam, certainly, sir, I am your D-sailor. And I will explain to you why you don't need actually to buy a new fridge or a new shirt. Because your fridge is not that old, because your shirt is not that bad. So this was basically advertisement to make people aware that you can recycle, you can reuse, you can try to... It was a big problem for the French government, because the textile industry, for example, came out and said, well, do you want unemployment to be up in France because people will not be able to sell any more shirts because of these kind of things? So my first priority is let's put awareness on people about facts and about what is the objective in terms of recycling policy. The second thing is there are a number of regulatory barriers that we need to deal with. And let me give you one example. In Finland, we have a great project in steel processing called Papojarvi that actually we saw in Helsinki. The problem is that they are not using slag because slag is considered as waste and cannot be recycled. And I mean, there are certainly good reasons for that, but there are also certainly good reasons to allow this to be recycled. And finally, I think what we need to do a better job is to move from recycling to reusing. And it is obviously especially the case when you are talking about water and agriculture. We are doing a poor job in Europe in terms of reuse of water. And I think, given water scarcity that is on the way, this is something where we need absolutely to make a special effort.
Well, awareness, regulatory, and what we always say, circular economy is not just recycling, but it is actually, much more earlier in the phase in how you design things, reuse, extend lifetime of a product that's highly relevant. So please welcome me in thanking Mr. Fayol for this great contribution, and good luck at your next speaking opportunity. Well, let me turn around to our distinguished panel. I already introduced Minister Heijnen earlier, so let me also introduce the other guests. So I'll start from left. Mrs. Yulaswati, do I pronounce that correctly? Yes. Deputy Minister of National Development from Indonesia. Welcome. She oversees the national development plans in the field of circular economy. She also chairs the SDG implementation team and has a long experience in designing Indonesia's anti-poverty programs. So welcome on the panel. And then we have Stefan Tito, State Secretary of the Environment of Germany, who also has a long track record in sustainability, because I've heard also in your previous role in the Berlin State Senate Department, you were also focused on environment, urban mobility, and climate action. So I think we'll have a really interesting perspective, both from the European, but also from Asia. So very welcome on the panel. So let me start with Mrs. Julasovati, if I pronounce that correctly. So you've heard from Minister Heijnen talk at the start of the session about how the Netherlands sees the linkages between climate policy, the circular economy, and financial institutions. Can you maybe also expand a bit on that and give your perspective also from the place where you're located and where you work?
Thank you very much. Thank you also for inviting me to be one of the panel in very important discussions. For Indonesia, actually, circular economy pretty much new. So that's why we go very much learning from other country experiences, including from the Netherlands and of course and other European countries. I have some slides, if it is made to be presented. Is it possible? Okay, we can go directly maybe to the third slide. While waiting, I just want to mention that actually, beside the COVID, Indonesia really experiences what we call as the triple planetary crisis. That's why we are preparing the transformations, and the green economy would be the game changer for Indonesia. And circular economy is one of the strategy that we have to go. Along the line, we also experiencing learning the shift from the linear toward the circular. So we learn not only the 3R, but now we also learn through the 9Rs. And of course, it helps us to create an enabling conditions, including the incentive schemes, data management, the governance, the communication strategy, as well as the financing scheme. First of all, we have estimations or scenario on the decarbonizations, which is toward the net zero emissions. It takes around 51.6 billion US dollar per year up until 2060. And of course, it creating a huge gap, not only from the government side, but also from the private entities. That's why we, the earlier speaker mentions, we go step by steps to developing an ecosystem for the green economy investment as well as green transitions. So on the finance, the government has established a clear policy directions, like I mentioned, in the long-term development plan as a law, and then including also set up some indicators as well as the regulations for conducive circular economy investment. And then on the financial institutions, of course, not only the Ministry of Planning, we work together with the Financial Service Authority, for example, to work with other banks and the financial institutions to prioritize the impact-based investment through creating for example, the green taxonomy, and then also ESG criteria into the investment decisions. So the financial services institutions also creating a guidelines for sustainable financing, and then we working together with Ministry of Finance, developing the SDGs bond, green suku, the Islamic based bond, And then now we are preparing also for the blue bond, including the coral bond, as well as the orange bond for the women empowerment. And also working with some institutions, Indonesia now has Indonesian Impact Fund, and of course some other instruments, including the SDGs investing map and the INFF. I actually in the slide show some examples of the startups who works on the circularity. One of the example is the Mycotech Lab. It is very inspired because they turn the mushroom from any medias like the palm trees or the sugar cane into a sustainable materials. It's actually like a vegetative leather that can be used for any interiors or also a handicraft. So basically it helps, I mean, this kind of the investment, the impact investment, help them to go or applying the R7, the repurpose, the R8, the recycle, and the source of the funding coming from the impact investment, not only from the Indonesia, but also other countries like Asian. Other experience, I mean, other examples is also on the partnership in the West Bank. It's involving the communities to create a solid waste banks. It turns the solid waste into the gold because they could have a saving in the gold plate, and it's really helped to improve their welfare. So at the end, I just want to highlight that actually circularity create an opportunity not only for green investment but also people to acquire green technology. And of course, it takes more investment. But at the end, if we hand in hand between the communities, the NGOs, and other partners, we could support a various circular business in the community. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for your contribution. I think you started out saying you want to learn from others, but if I learn what you already have been doing in terms of not just defining it as recycling, but using all the different R's. In addition, the measurement, leveraging the taxonomy, working with different stakeholders. Sounds Indonesia as well on its way in the transition, in the journey of circularity. And maybe finally, I think the comment you made at the end is quite important, is really viewing circularity as an opportunity and leveraging for, on the economy side, but also for job creation. So thank you very much. So same question for you, Mr. Tiddo. What's Germany's perspective?
Yeah, thank you, Martin. But first of all, I would like to thank you, Vivian, for this, inviting to this very important conversation, and congratulations for the leading role on this crucial topic and how to direct the very much needed finance flows towards investment in the circular economy. So regarding the link you already mentioned between climate policy and circular economy, we are absolutely on the same page. So we see the circular economy and resource efficiency as a powerful instrument for climate change mitigation that are not used enough yet. So, and in this context, allow me to add some advertising on our own behalf, because on the 10th of December, so on Sunday, next Sunday at 12:30, we will host a side event on precisely this topic at the German pavilion, and everybody is warmly invited, of course. And the event today adds already a decisive puzzle piece to the full picture, Esther already mentioned earlier. So the question of how to direct finance towards circularity. And while the science on the big potential of the circular economy is clear, we do not yet see the necessary upscaling of circular business models or circular materials flow. And one lever to change that is to create a conducive policy environment, which is why we are currently working on a national circular economy strategy in Germany. But as we are seeing in the climate sphere and with the EU taxonomy, the question of finance is the absolutely key. And access to adequate finance is one of the key elements that the BDE, this is Germany's largest industry association, identified as condition for the circular transformation. This isn't an easy task since it requires some degree of international alignment in terms of standards, indicators, and so on. But it is absolutely necessary task, which is why I'm very happy to be part on the conversation today.
Thank you, Mr. Tiddo. I think the last question you raised, I think, is a question that, especially in the circularity movement, has been the key question. Is we see a lot of initiatives and a lot of, like on a smaller scale, but how do we get similar scaling as we have seen in the energy transition, and also leveraging both public and private capital to do so? So interesting to explore more. So let me turn now to Minister Heijnen. So you've heard from Indonesia and Germany, and of course, in your opening keynote, you already gave a bit of perspective. But what do you see as really as the key government's role in stimulating financial institution to really increase, as we just discussed, how do we get from 1.5% to 15%, and that's just the EIB, and really unleash larger amounts of capital? How can we do better?
Well, I think one of the most important things is also to really set standards on not only a national level when it comes to circular economy, but on a more global level. What you hear is that companies are willing to invest in more circular business models, but they also want to make sure that policy is not changing all the time, making it very insecure for them to make the investments. So that is why we in the Netherlands made our circular economy plan, which sets a dot on the horizon, as we say in Dutch, where we want to be fully circular by 2050 and 50% circular by 2030. The bar is set quite high because it's going to be quite a challenge, but we don't want to lower the bar because we really want to push ourselves to get to the goals that we set in our national program. And as long as we do that, so if the government is reliable in the direction that we want companies to go in, then that's going to be a huge help. So that's one. Then when it comes to the financial sector being a catalyst, we, as the Netherlands, via the Dutch Central Bank, and I have brought together key parties to discuss common grounds for moving forward, and we need to take steps that we set out in the roadmap on circular economy and the financial sector to develop concrete targets. As I said, we have targets in the Netherlands, but the problem is we are doing quite well in the Netherlands when it comes to circularity, but I always say we're very small in size. So the impact if Indonesia takes measures is a little bit bigger. So that is important. Also what you mentioned, to share the knowledge that we have. But I have to say we also learn from you because you are already taking good initiatives. So let's continue to do that because it's very important to learn from each other and to see how we can really accelerate faster. What I see in the Netherlands is that we have a lot of good businesses that have developed in the basic stage, but they have to scale up. So we also need the investments to work towards the scale up phase. And furthermore, I think to also be able to scale, governments have a very essential role to play to create a level playing field between circular businesses and linear businesses. So we can do that by taxes or other market incentives. We can make fiscal changes to discourage the use of raw materials and encourage circularity by discouraging the use of raw materials, for example. So in that way, governments really can play a very crucial role. Also, to answer your question, there's really a lot to do, but we have to do it together in good partnerships with the financial sector, with the business community, and we have to take steps, but we have to do it also because we are running out of natural resources. So it is not something, a circular economy is not a nice to have, it is a need to have. That's what I always say. And we are kind of the pioneers, but this is the direction that we will all have to go in because we're simply running out of natural resources to keep on producing as we are doing now.
So thank you, Minister Heijnen. So let me maybe highlight one point you said that struck me, which is sort of level playing field. And what I like about that, it's very simple words, but very hard to put in
Yes.
practice. And my perspective is like the circular model, I think in essence, if you look at all externalities and what it does for society, is the superior model, yet the linear machine that has been developed since the last 100 years is, as Esther showed in her numbers, still outpacing us, right? So, and it's hard to compete with that. So we'd love to explore that more with the other panelists. But maybe back to you. You mentioned in your opening statements financing and the importance of that also for Indonesia. Can you maybe sort of expand a bit on that, and what is the role you see for the multilateral development banks?
Well, a lot of initiatives are going on, actually, not only coming from our ministry, but also for others. So within the countries, we are also learning from each other about what happened on the finance or what happened on the climate resilience, as well as on the circular economy. So I think in the future, maybe we could think about creating a nexus between the climate, finance, as well as the circular economy to harmonize all the things that we learn in order to accelerate. That's one point. So I think about the circular economy, the circular exchange network, it would be very useful to facilitate the communications, the sharing knowledge, as well as creating an impact in which could attract the investment from the banks. I mean, now domestic banks also attract to help the SMEs in the circular economy. In the global chains, for example, they're also applying the principle of businesses like in agriculture, regenerative, it's including the circularity. So I think more and more now, not only aware, but also applying or implementing and showing the impact, particularly for reducing the climate impact. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to Minister Tiddo. So you mentioned in your previous intervention that you're actively working on the national plan and all the initiatives you're already doing in Germany. So what role would you potentially see yourself playing a bit more internationally?
Thank you, Martin. There are, of course, several pathways, but I would like to focus on two of them. And again, what are we doing on the national level to push this internationally, and what we are doing on the international community itself, of course. So for the first point, I would like to highlight that we are already using our international climate initiative, the so-called ECI, my ministry's most important instrument for international climate finance, to support resource efficiency and circularity projects around the world. And For example, we are currently working together with the Indonesian government to improve resource efficiency and circularity in the Indonesian industry as part of an ICI project, and we will strongly increase the circular economy issue and footprint in our ICI portfolio. But on the second point, the international cooperation, I think we need to take several steps. One step could be to find convergence on the importance of circularity for climate action, and in doing so, the circular economy may become more relevant for the existing climate finance. And an additional step should be a closer coordination with multilateral financial institutions on the question which framework conditions are needed to enable the large-scale funding, specifically for the circular transformation, of course. And for this endeavor, the roadmap that was presented at COP27, I think, is a really good starting point.
Thank you. So I think we have a couple of minutes left. So I want to wrap up with the last question and maybe get a short answer from each of you. And I'll start with Mr. Heijnen. So, Minister Tiddo, in your last comment, you basically said sort of, governments working more closely together with the multilateral development banks and leveraging that to get things done in places like Indonesia and others. So my key question would be to all the panelists is, what could your contribution be and your support be for this circularity exchange network that's now been going strong for a couple of years with the EIB and all the other multilateral development banks? Minister Heijnen.
I think everyone has to play their part, and as being the Netherlands, we're very happy to do so. I think cooperation, as I said before, is very important, and then especially the tripartite cooperation, so business life, governments, and the financial sector. 2 is a pair, 3 is a party, they sometimes say, so let's keep that in mind. But we will also continue to start and join initiatives to the circular economy at the heart of finance. For instance, I look forward to kick off something similar to the IFI Circularity Exchange Network in the private sector or between national and regional governments. And with the organization of that event, I would once again like to say that we really like to share knowledge, and let's try to do that as much as we can, because there's still so much to learn from all the good initiatives that are taking place.
Thank you, Minister Heijnen. Over to Minister Tiddo.
So I think that the Circularity Exchange Network has shown very important leadership on this topic so far. And we need a broad conversation on how to further advance this nexus. So therefore, we will support the network and work with all relevant partners to achieve our common goal, to make sure that the circular economy transformation pays off financially, but, and this is even more importantly, for our planet and for the people. Thank you.
And last but not least, Minister Yulaswati.
Yeah, currently our office developing what we call as a roadmap for the circular economy up until 2045, so 20 years ahead. It will bring a clear path about what we're gonna achieve. I mean, some targets, and of course, it's also a clear division of labor among us, and also would be a reference for investment. Thank you.
Well, join me in thanking the distinguished panelists. And I know some of you have to move on, so feel free to untie yourselves from the headsets, and we'll move on to the next session of the next speaker. So I'm very pleased to invite the next speaker, Jessica Andrews with UNEP FI. She's the head of climate accountability. And as you know, UNEP FI, of course, convenes financial institutions to advance knowledge and practice in areas including climate, nature, pollution, and circular economy. So please welcome Jessica Andrews to the stage.
Thank you, Martin. It's my pleasure to be here on behalf of the United Nations Environment Program Finance Initiative. We are an initiative that works with the private finance sector. We work with over 500 private banks and insurers, representing 170 trillion in assets under management. We also work with over 5,000 investors, representing over 120 trillion in assets under management. So a very large portion of the private financial community. We do this through the principles for responsible banking, the principles for sustainable insurance, and the principles for responsible investment. We are very pleased to have grown our work with financial institutions with relationship to circular economy over the last several years. We all know this is an imperative that we act on circular economy. The science underscores that this is necessary. I don't have to tell this group that over 90% of materials extracted are used and then wasted. And as Esther pointed out, 7.2% of all materials in the economy are circular. So we have a long way to go. Thank you, Esther. We believe that policy has an essential role to play to accelerate and scale up circular economy solutions. It's essential that policy, as the minister said, helps set standard targets and standard guidelines so that all actors can act with confidence. We also believe that policy can help enhance the data that is necessary for making and putting in place these plans. And finally, policymakers can help direct financial institutions to where they need to put their funding to support this global initiative. More and more countries are beginning to develop circular economy plans and strategies, or sector-specific policies. But we need more. We know that only 27% of NDCs have included reference to circular economy. And that's why we are very pleased to be a knowledge partner for the Circular Economy Network, and we really welcome this initiative today. Although this initiative is focused on the role of international financial institutions to unlock circular economy finance, it was initiated through workshops involving also private financial institutions, which we convened, who brought their experience and their desires to be a part of this movement. Furthermore, we hope that the IFIs work can help advance and pave the way for private finance investment. It's really important that these two spheres work together. As a result of all that I have just highlighted, we are thrilled to announce that UNEP FI will work on a study of the role of national governments in financing circular economy. We will aim to develop practical recommendations to policymakers and financial institutions. UNEP FI will collaborate with the Global Alliance on Circular Economy and Resource Efficiency to do this. Finance was identified by that alliance as one of the key target areas and priorities to scale up. This initiative will aim to have practical recommendations to policymakers and financial institutions along the lines of enhancing the understanding of available financial mechanisms, bringing the needs of countries that need financing to the financial institutions, and fostering this collaboration between private and public finance. We really welcome all of you in joining us in this initiative, and thank you for letting us announce this today.
Well, thank you for that great contribution. I think we're almost out of time, so I'll just wrap up real quick and leave you with 3 points, 3 key takeaways from this session. I think the first one is circularity has a very, very key role to play, not just in climate, but also biodiversity and pollution. My second key point is it's actually the level of circularity is declining and lacks significant investment. And in order for circularity to play its role in the net zero conversation, it needs substantially more investment. And my third point is, in order to do that, we need financial institutions. That's why we had them on stage, and we're hosting the Circularity Exchange Network with the IFIs. But we also need national governments. And lastly, we need to have them work together. Well, thank you very much for this session, and thank you very much for hosting us here at the Benelux Pavilion. And I wish you all a great COP28.